everyone. Thank you for being here today to Cannabis Forward's inaugural South Carolina Cannabis Conference. We're very honored to have you here with us today. This is an overwhelmingly positive turnout. We're so excited to have you with us. My name is Emily McSherry, and I am the founder of Cannabis Forward. This conference today expands on our medical cannabis educational forums from years past with the exciting addition of a vendor expo or an industry expo, and we're hoping to grow even more next year and have even more vendors present, and hopefully at that point in time we will have to be able to have a different variety of options to sell to you, if you know what I mean. So I hope you took the time to visit those vendor booths. They're all going to be set up at the end, so if you haven't had the opportunity to stop by yet, feel free to do so on your way out today. Of course, also visit our donation box on your way out today, as we obviously have massive expenses to cover with this event. We're in the green, which is fantastic, but we could certainly help use some assistance moving forward. I want to start by offering a huge debt of thank you to those sponsors who made this event possible today. Smoke and Brew, located here in Greenville, South Carolina, has 2 locations, one on North Pleasantburg Drive and one on Woodruff Road, if you dare to go out that far. From Denver, Colorado, we have Horitcultural Solutions. They also have an event coming up, I believe, in the Low Country in the spring, so be sure to stop by their booth to get information about their event that they're hosting. And from Las Vegas, Nevada, we have Quality Cannabis Solutions. They're wonderful people. They helped move sofas for me earlier today. You show up, you gotta work, right? We also have the Ionario Law Firm, Got Rocks Music Venue, and FET Magazine here with us as sponsors today. We're so grateful to have the participation of businesses and cannabis advocacy groups from across the state. As vendors, we had Lotus Farm and Garden, Primo Plant, South Carolina Compassionate Care Alliance, Minorities for Medical Marijuana, and Columbia Normal. I'm very excited to introduce this year's speakers for the conference, the former U.S. Attorney General for South Carolina, Mr. Bill Nettles, Ladybug's Medibal's owner, cannabis patient and advocate, Ms. Kendra Jeffress, and all the way from Vancouver, Washington, your cannabis friend, and now mine, Farmer Tom. And I wanted to thank all of our wonderful volunteers who sacrificed their time to be here with us today and worked so diligently and compassionately to help me with this, especially my assistant, Gail Kenny, and my good friend, Shauna Stafford. Now, a few months ago, we polled members of the Cannabis Forward Patient Support Group and asked them what topic they would like for me to cover in the conference today. The poll gave several options, but the winning option was decoding the jargon used in cannabis research studies. And if you've ever taken the time to do cannabis research online or in research case studies, then you know just how overwhelming the vocabulary for those studies can be. So let's take a quick moment to dive into the research lexicon of cannabis. One of the most commonly used tools for researching cannabis online is PubMed. PubMed comprises over 26 million citations for biomedical literature, and it's developed and maintained by the National Center for Biotechnology Information. If you go online to PubMed and you enter in the word cannabis into the search engine, your query will return over almost 17,000 citations. That's a lot. We recommend that when using PubMed, you search under the Clinical Queries tab so that your return will include only clinical study categories, systematic reviews, and medical genetics. To date, 112 clinical trials of medical cannabis have been performed covering 43 different medical conditions. And one of the first things to notice when evaluating what type of research is, is to look at how the study has been performed. We begin with case studies. These consist of a collection of reports on the treatment of individual patients. Because there are no control groups to compare outcomes, they have little statistical validity. However, numerous successful case studies could lead to interest for further investigation. Case studies are what you will most often find on a generic search for cannabis on PubMed. Case control studies are studies in which patients are already diagnosed with a specific condition. They're compared with people who do not have the condition. These types of studies are done to look for factors that may cause the condition or exposures that may have caused the condition. Next, we have cohort studies. I like that word, cohort. Cohort studies identify a group of patients who are already taking a particular treatment or have an exposure. It follows them over time, and then it compares their outcomes with a similar group that has not been affected by the treatment or the exposure that's being studied. And lastly, we have randomized controlled clinical trials. And these are the most reliable and proven studies. These trials are carefully planned experiments that introduce a treatment or exposure to study its effect on real patients. These trials include methodologies that reduce the potential for bias and allows for comparison between the intervention groups and control groups. Currently, there are more than 20 clinical trials taking place with CBD and THC-derived products. So now you know a little bit about the different types of research that takes place. It's important to know, where does the experiment take place? And you have three situations: in vitro, in vivo, and in situ, or any combination of the above three. Let's begin by taking a look at in vitro. This is a Latin term that means within the glass. It references experiments or observations that are done on the tissue outside of the living organism. So within the glass, often looking in petri dishes or in test tubes. Next, we have in vivo, and this is a Latin term that means within the living. It references experiments which are done in the organism's natural environment or in the organism itself, such as animal studies or human clinical trials. Finally, you have in situ. That's Latin for on-site. These are examinations and observations that take place where it occurs, such as an archaeological dig or a cannabis farm. When you study for cannabis for medical applications, you're going to focus heavily on the endocannabinoid system. Raise your hand if you know about the endocannabinoid system. So there still needs to be some more education on that. So we'll be sure to include that in our next conference as well. So when you're studying the endocannabinoid system, you're going to be inundated with information about cannabinoids, receptors, ligands, binding sites, agonists, antagonists, and many other terms that are used to describe how cannabinoids act on receptors in the human body to create different effects. Now, it's good for you to think of ligands as keys and receptors as the keyhole. The mechanism actions that will affect whether the lock will work. Receptors and ligands come in many different forms, but they all come in closely matched pairs. The binding of a ligand to a receptor changes the receptor's shape and its activity to allow it to transmit a signal or produce a change inside the cell. But what are ligands? I can see you now. Ligands are molecules that bind to bigger molecules. You can consider them the electron donors that get things going. Ligands consist of lipids, fatty acids, vitamins, hormones, and neurotransmitters. When referencing cannabis, the ligands are the phytocannabinoids, the cannabinoids from the plant, the endocannabinoids, which are the cannabinoids that are created within your own system, your own body, or the synthetic cannabinoids, the man-made cannabinoids. Receptors are molecules that are able to respond to the stimuli and transmit the signal to the nerve. in reference to cannabis, these would be your receptors for CB1 receptors, CB2, as well as FAW, G-coupled protein receptors 18, 55, and many others still being discovered. They also include receptors for serotonin, dopamine, and opioid. A binding site is a region on a protein of DNA or RNA where the ligands may form a chemical bond. This is the house. There are two types of binding sites, orthosteric and allosteric. So everybody doing okay so far? Okay, great. This gentleman's doing great. I'm moving forward. The orthosteric binding site is the primary binding site. It is used by almost all ligands. Allosteric means quite literally other. So it's your other binding site, not frequently used. It might be, oh my bad, it might be the back door, so to speak. These binding sites, the allosteric, they cannot directly activate the CB1 receptor, but it can induce a change in the shape of the protein structure so that it increases or decreases the receptor activation by an agonist. So what's an agonist? Keep going, everybody's doing okay. So we have three different types of agonists: a full agonist, a partial agonist, and an inverse agonist. A full agonist is a chemical that binds to a receptor and it activates it to produce a biological response at its full potential. So you could consider this as if you had a light switch and it was off, and you turned it on and the lights came on to their full capacity, their full power. Now, full agonists can activate the CB1 receptor to the maximal extent possible. Thankfully, THC is not a full agonist. Full activation of the CB1 receptor produces undesirable effects. And that's why when you see things like synthetic cannabinoids such as spice, these are full agonist CB1 receptors. And that is why so many emergency departments see patients coming in or people coming in with a bad reaction to a synthetic cannabinoid, because it puts that CB1 receptor at full capacity, which is not desired. Next, we have partial agonist, and this binds to and activates a given receptor, but only at partial efficacy at the receptor relative to what we just saw with a full agonist. So you could consider this a light switch with a dimmer, and you're just turning the light on to half power. THC is a CB1 partial agonist, and this is why cannabis has such a fantastic safety profile. Next, we have the antagonists, and just like in literature, these are the ones that oppose. Neutral agonist binds to a receptor. It does not increase or decrease cellular activity, but it blocks the actions of both agonists and inverse agonists. So an antagonist will bind, let's say, to the CB1 receptor at the main site, the orthosteric site, without activating the receptor. And it blocks the agonist, such as THC, from binding to the site. CBD is is a neutral antagonist. So it can reduce the psychoactive effects of THC. This is why CBD and THC work so well together, is because of the inverse agonist action. An important thing to note is that neutral antagonists do nothing on their own in the absence of an agonist. They must have the presence of an agonist to work against something. Again, why CBD and THC work so well together, full cannabinoids. Inverse agonists, this is where it gets a little confusing. These bind to the same receptor as an agonist or an antagonist, but it has the opposite effect. So an inverse agonist has all the properties of a full agonist, except that it shifts the equilibrium in the opposite direction. Many G-protein coupled receptors have constitutive activity, which means that it's capable of producing a biological response in the absence of a bound ligand. You know, CB1 receptors are G protein coupled receptors, so these will be no exception. So when the CB1 receptors are activated by an inverse agonist working in the opposite direction, is inhibiting the receptor's constitutive activity. So if you're always running, you're constantly going, the CB1 receptor is activated by an inverse agonist and it starts to reverse that process. And this is why cannabis works so well for patients with Parkinson's, with chemotherapy-induced nausea and vomiting wasting syndrome, as well as epilepsy. Well, congratulations, we did it. We're now smarter. We've learned about the different types of research, how and where the research takes place, as well as a very brief crash course into the world of ligands, receptors, and binding sites. If you want to ask questions in a public forum, please do so on our Facebook page over the next couple of days. Feel free to include recommendations on topics that you would like to see us cover at future events. So, let's get started down to our speakers. I'm excited to introduce our next speaker. He's had an active role in the cannabis legislation process here in South Carolina, donating his time to our efforts, and to everyone, not just us, everyone. And he's been an honored guest at many cannabis conferences across the nation. He's the former U.S. Attorney General to South Carolina under President Obama. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Bill Nettles.
Okay, so let's get one thing straight real quick. And it's a mistake my parents make all the time. I was not the United States Attorney General for South Carolina. That's Alan Wilson. He's a friend of mine. Philosophically, we're very different, but we're friends, okay? My parents called me Attorney General all the time, too. I'm not sure they ever really figured out exactly what it was I did. I was the Chief Federal Law Enforcement Officer for the state of South Carolina for 6.5 years under President Obama, one of the few bosses I ever had I liked. I got that job, and I came in, and I had been, to give you, I'm not here to talk about me, but just give you a little bit of background. I had been, when I got out of law school, I was a public defender, and then I left being a public defender, and I went and started a law firm. And the law firm, we did all sorts of law. We did civil, we did criminal. And then whenever I got to the United States Attorney's Office, I had a perspective on the war on drugs that I think a lot of my compatriots did not have. That is, I defended a lot of people who had been charged with possession of drugs. And I saw what the war on drugs had done to our country, and I found it very sad. And so I set about the 6.5 years I was there, South Carolina, we literally were one of the leaders in the Smart on Crime initiatives and the, just being a little bit smarter about how we addressed mass incarceration. When we get right down to it, that's what the country did when it started the war on drugs, was mass incarceration. Okay, we incarcerated massive groups of people, primarily based on race, but it was awful, okay? And I'm here to tell you that we did what we could to try to make it better. So part of that was, I had a working knowledge of how the war on drugs had worked. And then, towards the end of my tenure there, we really started seeing the opioid crisis, all right? And, for those of you that haven't really followed that, basically what happened was pharmaceutical companies found there was a lot of money to be made in treating pain through pharmaceuticals, which is, there's a lot of people got a lot. What am I doing wrong here? Is that me? Yeah. Okay. What are you doing to me, man? I can turn this off. I swear to God, I yell loud enough. Yeah. Is that better? Can y'all hear me? All right, okay. Is that better? Is that better? Okay. So, maybe if I stand back a little bit. It's been a long time since I was a front man. What am I doing wrong? Okay. All right, so, where was I? Oh, opioid crisis. That's where I was. So then what happened was, as we all know, there's a lot of folks came in and had legitimate pain, were treated through opioids by the person that they trust their most, their doctor. They developed an addiction to opioids, we were able to, one of the few drug crises, we've been able to identify the source very quickly. We were able to start shutting that down some of the opioids. Well, what that created was a massive opportunity for heroin, okay? So then by the time I was leaving, there was a huge heroin problem. The number one cause of accidental death in the country right now is drug overdose, okay? Not swimming pools, not handguns, opioids, all right? Look, it's just become math now. I mean, this isn't abstract, it's math. States that have medical marijuana have a measurable reduction in opioid deaths, period. That's a fact, okay? That's not fake news. That is data. That's a fact, all right? So I kind of got into it because of that. It was still something I felt very strongly about. I felt their lives were getting ruined because of all this. And then as I got into it, I started seeing, started meeting more and more individuals who literally the best form of medicine for them was cannabis. And that was extraordinarily compelling to me. Then I went out to Colorado and I realized that, well, I got to meet with a lot of high-placed people in this industry out there. And I started to realize there was a lot of really good jobs being made, okay? A lot of really good jobs being made. Taxes were being raised. Well, tax rates weren't being raised, but the amount of money being brought in through taxes being brought in. And as a whole, things were just doing along just fine. One of the things that the Obama administration did that I think was really smart was, at the time, it's funny, I had dinner with Jim Cole 2 weeks ago. That's the Cole memo guy, okay? And, and I was saying to him that I really, whenever they did it on the state-by-state thing, I really couldn't understand it, but now I do get it, in that they literally set up individual incubators, okay? And we can look at what some states have done right, what some states have done wrong, and we can cobble together something. Well, here's where we are. Right now, over 50% of the country has got the opportunity to either have medical or recreational cannabis, right? So we're at a tipping point now, okay? We don't have to worry about, I know in South Carolina, sadly, being on the front of things isn't something that we typically try to do, but that day is come and gone, okay? Be on the front of it. If you wanted to be on the front of it, it's too late. If you want to be right in the middle or the tail end, we're there, okay? So we're in that sweet spot, okay? This isn't cutting edge stuff anymore, all right? So we can all feel comfortable. We're not doing anything crazy. We're not doing anything rash. Just let me say this. This is going to happen, all right? Because, as I go, and I was speaking to a group a couple weeks ago up in Greenville, I'm starting to realize that, I spent most of my life in politics. Let's be clear about one thing. I didn't get to be the United States Attorney in South Carolina because, like, President Obama looked and said, bring me the finest lawyer in all of South Carolina. I got it because of politics, okay? That's how I got that job, all right? I understand politics, and I can tell you something. In my career in politics, I have never seen an issue that has got such a broad coalition of people behind it. Every time I go to one of these meetings, I meet a different affinity group that I had not even imagined, okay? And so you've got people who have come to this because they've got a loved one that's got cancer or epilepsy, okay? And it is a very real, stark issue for them, okay? We've got people that have come to it purely because they've got empathy, okay? One of the most beautiful emotions that humans have. That is, feel someone else's suffering, feel someone else's pain, and say, I'm going to get involved in this fight for them, okay? We've got, the Christian right that's talking about how we've got this beautiful plant here, and I agree with that. I'm on board with that. We've got people that are, that just the whole pain issue. We've got the civil libertarians. Congressman Sanford just came out, and it really literally makes sense, okay? The federal government years ago passed a law that says if you own a cannabis company, all right, you can't write off your business expenses. So in other words, if you own a company selling alcohol, okay, you can write off your rent. You can write off, you get to take that as that doesn't get taxed. That's a business expense. You write off your rent, what you pay your employees, all that kind of stuff. Cannabis industries, you can't do that, okay? Congressman Sanford has joined, and I read the list. It's a very long, a lot of co-sponsors to change that just because philosophically it doesn't make sense, okay? The Federalist people, it literally doesn't make sense. So, having said that, I have, getting back to where I started on this whole little loop, is that I have never, in all of my time in politics, seen an issue that has got such a broad coalition of people. And let's not forget one other thing that is huge, okay? Look, if you're a person of color, all right, let me take one step back. The number of people that use cannabis in this state and in this country, all right, the racial breakdown is almost exactly the same. Okay, so the number of people of color that are using cannabis is roughly the same people, like me. White. I'm not, but you know what I'm saying. And so but your likelihood of being arrested for it is 4 to 5 times greater. That's wrong. Okay, that's just wrong. Okay, and if you're going to make something illegal, everybody ought to get treated the same. All right. So my point is, I've been roundabout trying to make, but there's just so many different places out there, and I got ADD, so it's kind of a mess. Is that there literally are, I cannot think of a single issue that's got more different affinity groups associated with it ever. And let's not forget the people that just want to get into it and make some money. Okay? Let's not forget that. My point in saying this is going to happen. I tell you, it's going to happen. It's just a matter of how many people have to put up with pain, how many tax dollars don't get corrected, how many people of color go to prison before it happens. But it is going to happen. And how does it happen? Let me tell you something. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand because I wouldn't do that to you. But if there's anybody in this room that hasn't registered and done vote in every single election, it's partly your fault. And you know who you are. This is how democracy works. This is how democracy works. People find an issue they agree on. People find an issue they can set aside a whole bunch of other things and say, we care about this. We are going to expect this from our leaders. And let's be clear about one other thing. The polling on this, it's just not even close anymore. Something like 70% of Republicans believe that we should have medical marijuana, okay? It is your job as a part of a democracy to register and to hold let's be clear about one thing. Everybody that goes to Columbia starting in January gets their little license plaque. You know who they work for? They work for you. They sometimes forget that. They work for you. And the way democracy works is you make them work for you. If you are not registered to vote, go register. If you're registered and don't vote, it's time to start. And if you register and you vote, it has come time for you to take this as one of the issues that you look to and lean on your candidates and legislators to answer to you about. That's all I got. Thank you.
All right, let's get it back down for the not so tall people. Thank you, Mr. Nettles, for being here today and for your passion and your compassion and your drive to effect change in South Carolina and to our nation. Our next speaker is my very good friend, Kendra. She is a cannabis patient. She uses cannabis for treatment of Crohn's, and she has a wonderful daughter who I admire very, very much, who suffers from a severe epilepsy syndrome. And she is never without a smile upon her face. And she also uses cannabis. If it wasn't for that, she wouldn't be here, which means Kendra probably wouldn't be over here with us. So please give a round of applause to our very good friend, Kendra.
Thank you for traveling in for our conference today and coming with us to learn some things about the health benefits of hemp. My name is Kendra, and as Emily said, I do suffer with Crohn's disease, and my daughter has a very rare type of epilepsy. She is the only person in the United States with her type. We are cannabis consumers, and hemp is completely legal within our states and gives us this variety that we can have within the cannabis plant. One of the main questions I'm asked all the time is does hemp get you high? No, it does not. It's truly organic. It does not contain the delta 9 THC component that would give us those hallucinogenic effects that we have. However, it does help to regenerate our cells. It is a God-given plant that has been here with us for centuries. One of our favorite things, one of my favorite biblical verses is Genesis 1:29. And with that, God said that he gave us seed and the plants to eat them with. Oftentimes, there are many biblical references that talk about cannabis and hemp in many forms, as far as in medicine, as early industry back in the days when they used them for many different textile reasons, and of course, for clothes. This plant itself works often when other medications fail. It offers an awesome pH balance, awesome neurogenerative effects, things that include natural well-being, that helps to fight off a lot of the negative oxidations that our body are occurring every day with the sun and the oxygen that we breathe. Eat your medicine is one of our family slogans. You want to definitely infuse your body with the great homeostasis type of foods, those whole foods that offer and find yourself the reversement of ailments. One of the things that hemp offers for us is a great well-being. It helps to fight bad cholesterol, improves skin conditions, contains perfect balance of fatty acids, helps to prevent heart disease, beneficial in degenerative diseases. It reduces inflammation, reduces nausea and vomiting, controls seizures, psychotic disorders, neurological and degenerative disorders, and combats cancer and tumor growths, controls depression and anxiety. And it does all of this without that delta 8 non-psychoactive connective tissue that Emily spoke of earlier, which we find within the cannabis plant itself. The nutritional benefits of the plant, everything that you need, it would include in a 4 heaping tablespoons, of 42 grams of this hemp seed. The hemp seed is very light in flavor and tastes very much like a sunflower seed. With all of these nutritional benefits, it helps to boost our endocannabinoid system, the system that Emily began to speak with us about, that internal system that helps us with healing. The endocannabinoid system, or these endogenous cannabinoid receptors, help us with a lot of the therapeutic uses of hemp. These receptors, those CB1 and CB2 receptors that Emily spoke of also, have great therapeutic effects when they work in an immunosuppressant, act binary receptors that help to slow down hypersensitivity to outside effects. Hemp's natural emollients are an awesome natural way to health. They help with many things. Again, we spoke of cancer earlier, and hemp and brain health. The gamma-linolenic acid, or GLA, supports normal function and growth of nerve cells and muscles and organs throughout the body. The omegas 3, 6, 9s, and fatty acids show to support brain function, which help us with cardiovascular function and also our circulatory system. There are many forms of natural medicines being used today, and I'd like to encourage you to use hemp as one of those. Pragmatic medicine is coming in very abreast in our world today, especially with a lot of the changes in the environment. And pragmatic medicine are people treating people with health problems and diseases using herbal methods and practical protocols, which are all natural things to help prevent disease. With this combination of traditional medicine and pharmaceutical medicine, we have primarily filled our bodies with phytonutrients and phytochemicals and extracts, which are plant-based chemicals and extracts that we get from our hemp seeds. A great study from the Natural Journal in April 2017 published that nutrients are best consumed, digested, metabolized, and utilized from whole foods versus supplements. So we have here the many different varieties or variations that the hemp plant itself can be used in. We have, of course, food, paper products, medicines, essential oils, nutritional supplements, livestock bedding and fuel, and the different parts of the flower that can be used in those ailments, especially my favorite, which would be eating. The hemp seed itself is high in fiber, omegas, again, the vitamins, the magnesiums, and the things that we need to prevent a lot of our diseases and ailments that we have now. The individual nutrients, such as vitamins and minerals, are more unlikely to do much good as isolates. So combining the hemp seeds with a natural diet will help with a lot of disease prevention. When we look at the whole plant itself, we have the whole stalk, which we use for different things such as fiber, textiles, and then the hemp seed, of course, which I cook with, which we use with the hemp nut, the seed for cake, and then also hemp oil. The reason is simple, that we should use our hemp. We have individual nutrients surrounded by a whole variety of ancillary nutrients, micronutrients, enzymes, coenzymes, and trace mineral activators that we are needed for individual nutrition to properly digest. Without ancillary nutrients, which we find in hemp, most assimilation does not occur. And with that, we have things that do not flush out of our systems. Those things begin to form masses of mucus and different things or extra fluids and things in the body that cause us pain and discomfort. For example, in eating fresh whole foods, orange juice, a fresh squeezed orange, does more than 1,000 milligrams of ascorbic acid, or something that would be in like a Centrum or more of a vitamin. So those whole foods and that phytonutrients there help with nutrient configuration, which do not disturb our body's balance. With our bodies being so far off of balance, or imbalances, lack of nutrients, ailments, the hemp seed helps to regulate those things for you. One thing that the hemp seed is full of are those B complex vitamins, the 6s, the 9s, the 12s, everything that we hear, wonderful protective neuroprotective type of things there. They're necessary for proper transmission of nerve impulses. For example, nerve impulses for the heart. The deficient B bodies will have bradycardia, which are slow pulse rates, heart blockage, or even slower pulse rates, and a complete heart blockage, which of course we know would be then a heart attack. The vitamin B4, which is very plentiful in that hemp seed also, provides with that antiparalysis type of procedure that would cause a heart attack. The vitamin B deficiencies reduce the loss of appetite. We have a lot of people that take those vitamin B shots. But remembering, too, with loss of appetite, that you're also suppressing the systems, which will have loss of tone, stomach, and muscles, and things like that. When people go through very mass larges of loss, such as weight loss, cancer, anything that's going to eat your muscle tissue, kind of disturb that balance within the blood flow, hemp is an awesome replacement for that. With these imbalances and severe nutritional imbalances in our diseases, it brings upon the reason and the medicinal benefits of hemp. In 1937, pharmacopoeia, there were many diseases that were treated, many ailments treated with hemp and also cannabis. The stalk in itself contains enough cannabinoids to fill your body or to start and regenerate that endocannabinoid system, and it can be plainly taken or shredded, just like oregano. Think of it being that simple. Within this hemp plant, we have these wonderful analgesic properties that help to reduce pain, anticonvulsants, so they help to reduce the epilepsy, anti-tumoral, those stresses that happen with cancer. They help to the body to maintain perfect synergy or homeostasis. It's antipsychotic and antibacterial. So imagine eating something that is constantly cleansing your body. The great therapeutic whole plant benefits are the same and greater in whole part. So the more plants you eat, the more nuts you eat, the more things that are nutrient rich, the more health benefits that you'll have from them. The phytopharms, or the plant pharmacology that we find when we speak about hemp and eating it, there is a big rise in efficacy also in medicines. So balancing your food with your medicine, of course, again, helps to balance that body out and give us good nutrient value. Hemp also, we know, of course, is great agriculturally and because of the soil and mineral depletion. Why is that important to us when we're eating? Because in 1992, there was an Earth Summit done, and the study soil worldwide. Average minerals levels had fallen worldwide by 72% in Europe, 76% in Asia, and 85% in the United States. The soils have shifted from high pH balances to acidic conditions, which help to alleviate, well, actually don't allow the earth to form good bacteria. And the good bacteria does not allow for plant growth, and plants then die, and we cannot survive. That's done by insecticides, fertilizers. There are many pesticides in the farmland that have destroyed the myopore hazel, which is our main soil balance, and the fungi, and it reduces the ability to absorb a little in our soil. So planting hemp so that our foods will once again regain their nutrients is also something we should think of. So until we come into that region when we're able to peripherally plant and have this wonderful agent back into our soil, eating that nut will help your body to revitalize that too. For example, when a plant grows, it draws the available minerals out of the soil, but our soil is lacking so much now it has no minerals to pull from in certain areas. The food mineral depletion and the fruits and the vegetables today are much less than values in the 1950s. For example, in the 1950s, you only had to eat one apple to contain all of its phytonutrients. Now, in 2017, you almost have to eat 100 apples to gain the same phytonutrients and those emollients and things that we get from apple. So eat a couple hemp seeds with the apple and you'll boost that up too. With human mineral depletion, you can trace that back in years for illnesses and different ailments, but it all is from lack of mineral deficiencies. Fixing this lack of mineral deficiency, we will help to cure some of the root of our diseases. And can you imagine just being able to do that with the cannabis plant? There's no disease, including cancer, that can exist in an alkaline environment. Dr. Otto Warburg, who discovered cancer, posted that for us. So in balancing and synergy, you can have your hemp seed there that help to give that body that alkalinity, that great perfect balance to reduce some of those inflammations and diseases that we have. When critical minerals and trace minerals are missing from our body, of course we need to replace them. Best way with phytonutrients, and again, that hemp seed is one of the superfruits, one of those super vegetables, one of those things that help to reduce mucus that forms in our body that continues ailments. So with this purification and regeneration and neutralizing and alkalinity, our bodies rely on the trace minerals to conduct and perform in perfect homeostasis. eat your medicine. We also can share hemp with our friends, with our animal friends. Very healthy for them, very good in their coats. Very good for our skins also. The hemp seed includes more omegas and things for skin regeneration than the flax seeds, coconut oil, many of the other nuts that are out there. It is a perfect plant protein. Protein and building blocks, we need those in our systems to structure, to continue moving. Why hemp? It's the most complete protein found in nature, contains all the essential amino acids and fatty acids, the recommended ratio of omega-3, 6, high protein and high fiber. It's awesome for our environment, environmental friendly, helps to regenerate that soil so that we can continue to eat naturally. It helps to heal the soil. The opportunities there are humongous for what you can do with hemp. We have food, nutrition, personal care, lotions, deodorant, non-toxic products, clothing, paper goods, my favorite, food. So in the future, when we think of the future, we think of our bodies, we think of our families, we think of the soil, we think of the earth. Hemp will be the future for all of us and mankind, or there won't be a future. So make sure, as we've heard before, that you voice your concerns of cannabis, that you tell your stories, that you let people know how this plant is healing you, so that we can continue to advocate and advise, and teach, and let everyone know of this plant that God has given us to heal us. I hope that you guys enjoy some food with Ladybugs Medibles out there tonight. Have a good evening. Thank you very much.
All right, let's see if I can work magic over here and make things switch up. So I have a new, oh, thank you. I'm trying to run off with my stuff. I have a new friend. He came all the way from Vancouver, Washington to join us here today, sacrificing a good bit of his usual routine. And if you know a farmer, you know they like their routine. So to have him here with us today is a very great honor and privilege. He is going to be introduced to you by one of our followers. There he is. We had a contest when you purchased a VIP ticket, you got entered into a drawing, and in that drawing you won the opportunity and privilege of being able to introduce our keynote speakers. So I'm going to bring up Jason, who is going to introduce our next presenter.
Yes. Our next presenter and keynote speaker began his plant career at age 12. In 2004, he established the Lucky Bunch Farm in Vancouver, Washington. In 2014, his company, Farmer Tom Organics, hosted the first ever CDC health hazard evaluation performed in the cannabis industry. The official report was released and published on the Center for Disease Control website in 2017, establishing a workplace health and safety baseline for OSHA regulations for the cannabis industry. He currently teaches cultivation classes at Clark College in Washington State and is developing an accredited cannabis course. Please join me in welcoming Farmer Tom.
Thanks y'all for showing up. See, I've only been here a couple days and I'm already yawing all over the place. So thanks a lot for coming. I'm gonna get this thing queued up here. Basically, I'm gonna talk a little bit about all the work that me and my wife have done over the years. I'm gonna give you guys some really good information on what you need to do next, because we've been out on the West Coast, we've been in your situation for years. So I'm trying to get this thing to open. So anyways, I've got a video slideshow, but I'm just gonna kind of let it roll through, and I'm gonna kind of organically just give the presentation on kind of how our life has been and all the things that me and my wife have, been a part of over the years. Let's see if I can get this thing to show up. It's still loading, yeah, and I think it's gonna.
You want this screen to be up there?
Yeah, sure. This is gonna cycle through.
Possibly. Yeah, it's not. Does it have a full screen mode on it?
Yeah, I think it would.
Well, it's loading something now. So. Okay, good.
All right, I think we got it. Well, thanks again for everybody showing up. Like I said before, this all started way back in the 90s for me. Cannabis, as soon as I smoked cannabis for the first time, I think it was like 13 years old, and it was like what I needed. It was like the missing link in my life. So I felt that, and then after doing research, I kind of figured out why. My mom was a doctor and a surgeon in San Diego back in the 60s, and back then they really weren't breastfeeding too much. And if you know anything about cannabis and cannabinoids, the only two places you're going to find cannabinoids, a wide range of them, is from your mother's breast milk and this blessed plant. So let me slow this thing down a little bit, probably driving you guys back crazy. So back in the days, and when we were trying to get cannabis legalized in California, it really all came out of San Francisco and Dennis Prohn and a group of people in San Francisco that created medical marijuana laws for the city. They went ahead and created Proposition 215 in California, which is the Compassionate Care Act, similar to what you guys are doing here. That law was written in a way to be really hard to interpret and to let cannabis prevail for quite a long time without too many rules or regulations. My wife was part of the first cannabis collective in San Diego in 1996 in Valley Center. They got raided, and then our collective garden in San Diego, which was called Shelter from the Storm. And the reason we put Shelter from the Storm together is because individually they were arresting us all. And we figured if we came together at a central location and grew together, that we could weather the storm out. And it worked for us for a few years until they raided us on July 6th of 1999. They raided us for 448 cannabis plants. Our collective was a traditional collective. You bought, to enter the collective garden, you bought a light, and then you paid $50 a month. You put some time in the garden, and it was, you got to pick your own. So we would hang the plants, and they would dry, and then the patients got to come in and pick what they wanted and take it home. So that was kind of the original intention of the collective garden. It kind of got out of control. The way they do it now, it's turned into mainly a more for-profit as opposed to really helping the patients out. So me and my wife have kind of always stayed in that let's help the patients mode. So back in the day when we started Shelter from the Storm, they raided us, and my wife saved my life that day. She was so on the spot. And back in the day, our only defense was the media. So we all had media lists with telephone numbers on it. And back then there was only pagers, and then I think Paula had one of the first cordless phones, and that she was able to use. So during the raid, they weren't sure if they were gonna raid us, and finally they made the call, and in the meantime, Paula was on the spot, and she had called ABC, Fox, and CBS, and they were all on the site, and that made the police really nervous. And so, you know, in a lot of these cases in the old days, the police don't want the media to show up because they're going to be able to railroad you through the system pretty quickly. With some media exposure, like I said, media was our friend, and media still is our friend. You know, that's the way we get the word out about how safe cannabis is and really keep everybody up to speed on the momentum on a national level that is moving. So she was so on the spot that I knew I needed to have her, and we've been together ever since. Our goal was to start a sustainable farm where we taught people about the benefits of sustainable agriculture as a whole, and cannabis therapies. It's been pretty successful for us. We moved from San Diego. When they arrested us, we were very active in the medical marijuana community down there. We went to a lot of the town council meetings with our pot plants, and we put the little babies up there on a podium just like this and tell the city of San Diego's, the council, how safe cannabis was. We did it on a regular basis, so we were really visible in the community down there. After we were arrested, we showed up at the next city council meeting, and the mayor couldn't come out of her office because she was horrified that her police officers had arrested all of these patients. We had quadriplegics, AIDS patients, glaucoma, arthritis, severe pain, a lot of different issues. We took care of 21 patients at that place. The result of that was they never pressed charges, but they never dropped the charges either. So basically for me, it was like I was trying to figure out how I'm going to get through the next 7 years without getting arrested. I had a previous conviction when I was younger, a cannabis conviction, and another one would have been a mandatory 15 years in federal prison. So we moved out from San Diego. We moved to Southern Oregon, to Williams, Oregon, and the Applegate Valley in Southern Oregon is probably the premier growing region in the world. They've come up with a lot of great strains out there, Willie's Wonder and all this stuff. We stayed there for a few years, where I was a farm manager in an organic seed farm, and we also wildcrafted herbs throughout the whole Rogue Valley and the Applegate Valley in Southern Oregon. We harvested arnica, St. John's wort, chickweed, arnica, just a lot of different things. St. John's wort, and until we moved and found our farm in Vancouver in 2004. 04 is when we moved into our farm now. It was pretty much everything I was looking for. We were looking for a farm that had greenhouses, a lot of water, you know, land, all that stuff. So we found a 5-acre parcel. It was a nursery previously, so it had the greenhouses. It had all the infrastructure that I was looking for to create our educational center. During that time, the cannabis was gaining momentum during the late 2000s. We had built up our farm. We had started doing education. I worked with the dowsing group in San Diego, and my friend Devin, she showed up here today. She was part of our group down there. So we kind of set the precedents for our farm to be an educational center. We really, in the early 2000s, we started doing the medical marijuana farmers markets in Washington. So they were set up similarly to just a regular farmers market. You would bring your product, you'd set your table up, you would sell your product to pre-approved patients who would come through the door. It was a really good system. It worked really well in the gray market area. You'll find that as cannabis moves along from medical into recreational, there'll be a gap in there, and we call that area the gray area. And a lot of things can happen in the gray area that really you won't be able to enjoy those things once legalization happens, because legalization is all about money, you know, and it's the key component in moving cannabis forward. I mean, it's great to see all you people out here. I mean, this is like 1996 all over again for us on the West Coast. We were really naive. on what we were doing, and we all were energized, and we all knew that cannabis was good, and it helped us, or it helped somebody else in our lives. So through the late 2000s, we did the medical marijuana farmers markets, and I knew if I was going to make an impact, I'd have to jump out in front of the media. So I became the media contact for medical marijuana issues in Vancouver, Washington, Clark County. That's just right outside of Portland, Oregon. So through that, I kind of just bringing awareness to the different strains and how they were affecting the patients, about legislative issues. Then legalization happened, and Washington won, and so did Vancouver, which is a very conservative town. You know, people realize now that cannabis isn't this horrible thing. You know, we've all grown up where, I don't know about out here, but on the West Coast, there was always some sort of cannabis available all through school, and we all seem to turn out pretty well. You know, there are those people out there that have addictive personalities, and they're gonna, you know, cannabis would be a good thing for those people to be able to smoke on a regular basis, and it would keep them from going on to harder drugs. What we also found out, thank you. So as things moved on, during the medical marijuana farmers markets eras, we had a lot of concentrates, and the state was trying to figure out how they were going to use concentrates. So their first thing is they weren't really well educated. They thought that BHO, butane hash oil, was the only concentrate out there, and then that people were killing themselves trying to make it. So I got approached by Como News out of Seattle, and they asked me to do an open blast, and I thought, well, this would be a pretty good time to do some educating. So I said, sure, we'll do an open blast, but we're going to give you a 4.5-hour symposium on everything concentrates. So you, the media, and the public really knows what concentrates was. It's not just BHO, and they're not just killing them. There's RSO, there's full melt hash oil, there's bubble hash, there's CO2 oil, there's tinctures, there's all these different. So what we did is we put a 4.5-hour symposium on. The state legislative liquor control board also worked with us, and our deal was if you don't legalize it and you don't tax it, that these kids will continue to blow themselves up, you know, in these BHO explosions. And you can't, it's really hard to classify concentrates as one compound, BHO, when there's so many different other ones out there that work really well. So within 2 weeks, the state legislature passed a law making all concentrates legal. I worked really feverishly in my neighborhood. We had collective gardens in a county that doesn't allow collective gardens. And I mean, the backstory on that was when we first moved into our farm, there was a couple of meth house operations down the street, and I worked pretty closely with the sheriff's department to help them get rid of the meth houses. Actually, they called me up after it was all done and thanked me and my wife for being such active participants in getting rid of these methamphetamine houses. So, and the media knew that, so it was a good thing for me. I could be really public, and I knew that they were never going to come back and haunt me, because what a bad media piece that would make, right? Here's Santa Claus, he helps you out, close down a meth house, but you're going to go and bust him for a few weed plants? I think you got your priorities screwed up here. So things have really worked out. We've worked on the local level, state level, and then down the roads, and being so open to the media, we've got the chance to work with the federal government. How this all came about was I had worked with, we worked with the state changing the laws, and then in I think it was 2015, some kid blew themselves up in a BHO explosion in a legal operation, medical operation in New Mexico. You may have seen the footage out there, it was pretty horrifying. But OSHA got in touch with the union, and the union got in touch with me, and me and JD from Skunk Farm Research gave them another 4-hour symposium on hydrocarbons, butanes, and how they work and why these kids were blowing themselves up. That led to them going, the Department of Health and Human Services got allocated money to do research into workplace health and safety in the cannabis industry. And they thought that me and my wife would be the perfect intro to that. Since we are kind of old school cannabis farmers, we grow organic vegetables alongside of our organic cannabis. And for us, it's more of a lifestyle than an industry. I mean, it's turning out to that down the road for me, but in the early days, this has been our lifestyle, and that's what we wanted to promote, that we're not scary people. I'm your neighbor, you know. I'm the guy who goes to the county fair and cleans up blue ribbons for vegetables, and I also grow really good cannabis, and I'm really not a guy to be afraid of. So over the years, the federal government thing, I first got on the phone with them in the 1st of June of 2015, and I got on the phone with 10 agents from the Center of Disease Control. And the first thing I realized, they knew nothing about cannabis. So I said, well, before you come out and do the health hazard evaluation on our industry, wouldn't you like to come out and, you know, we could introduce you to the industry and show you how we're doing things so you could really get caught up? And I asked them, where are you getting your data from, your information? They said, well, we're getting it off YouTube. And we convinced them to come out. They were really excited. At first, we set up a tour. We were going to go into Washington and through Oregon to a bunch of producers and processors, and then auxiliary like CO2 manufacturers and maybe some BHO manufacturing, machine manufacturers. And we had it all set up, and they said, this is great. Then a couple days later, they said, oh, we can't do this. We can't have our agents going across state lines to what can be perceived as illegal operations. But what we can do is make your farm a secure location where federal agents can learn, touch, and handle cannabis. Are you okay with that? I said, sure. They go, well, the DOJ is going to have to vet you out. Are you okay? I said, please do it. You know, me and my wife have always abided by the laws. I'm not a mailer. I'm not a baller. I'm not running hundreds of pounds over there. That's never been my motive. My motive is to normalize this healing, wonderful plant and make it available to everyone. You know, when I was growing up as a kid, one of the driving things is we were action sports kids. We were skateboarders, surfers, you know, out of Southern California, and we were always having to wait for our weed. And I said, dang, if I can't just change that, so it would be more accessible. That's one of the goals I have in life, and I just kind of followed that and followed my heart, and things work out for me. And I realized that, and I've kind of embraced that. And working with the federal government was a really great experience. So they did come out. So when they came out on my dime, which I call my dime, they came out in August for 2 days. I think it was the 11th and 12th of August. And being an activist is kind of a sketchy word. Being an advocate for cannabis these days, it was my job to, so what I did was I invited all the top people in the industry to my farm, and we gave them a 2-day symposium on everything cannabis. I brought in extractors and trimming machines, and we did live demos for them for a bunch of different things. We kind of went over, I had 95 plants in my garden that time, so we showed them inside our garden. I also showed them all the nutrients that we're using and how we were taking care of the plants and how we take care of them from start to finish. But before that, during that thing, is I had the opportunity to, you get that 1 second opportunity where before we started, me and my friend smoked a couple joints about 10 feet away, and we did a couple dabs, and then we walked over there and said, now we're going to educate you. Because for me, I really want to normalize cannabis, and I want to show them the fact of who we are and how lucid we are and how we can string sentences together, and we're just pretty much normal people. And it worked. You know, they hung out with us. They went for pizza and beer. Of course, they bought their own. They hung out with us for 2 days, and they really got an understanding that cannabis isn't this horrible thing. That it's probably more of a political thing than it is a horrible detrimental to our health deal. So it was great to have them there. They hung out with us for 2 days, and then they scheduled to come back in October, where they came for 3 days and actually did the health hazard evaluation. I've got a copy of it here. Where is it? Yeah, this is the culmination of all of our work. It's in the Library of Congress. This was the first time any federal agency had ever worked with any cannabis person on any level, except for with another state like University of Mississippi. And we got the federal government to use the word cannabis instead of marijuana, because that was a big deal. They were, thank you. It was a real big deal. It wasn't until my daughter had found online that another government agency, a medical agency, had used the word cannabis. So we showed them that, and then when the report came out, they did use the word cannabis. They only slightly referenced marijuana, also known as marijuana. The report's online. You can see it at the cdc.gov. If you go to my website, there's a direct link to it. It was a really great experience. We had him there in October for the actual health hazard evaluation. So these are all scientists. They all have PhDs behind their name. And what the guys from NIOSH did, the guys that came to our farm, was they write the reports, the scientific reports that are given to OSHA, and then OSHA writes workplace health and safety standards from the reports. So they brought in everybody, like Kurtan here you see in the picture eating. They brought him in from Africa. He'd spent the last 2 years looking at Ebola victims through in a glass booth. So he was quite relieved to come out to the farm. And how this whole evaluation came about was in Colorado, I think in 2012, the Sheriff's Department the Sheriff's Department union filed a complaint with OSHA saying that their officers were in danger where they were going into these grows because there was molds and powdery mildews and such. So black mold and mold's a big thing in the federal government and for our health. So they got the money together, and we did this year-long project. It took a while for them to release it. Last year we got this. It came out in February of 2016. This was the actual first report. It's basically on endotoxins. That's like black molds, and we were actually under any kind of standards. Like throughout the whole process, we were under any kind of federal guidelines for the exact number of any kind of horrible things that could happen. What they were looking for was black mold, a repetitive use. So when they came for the 3 days, the first day we did harvesting. I had 20 plants left. Let me see if I can find it. I had 20 plants left, so we harvested for them in big leaves. So what I mean is harvested, we cut down the plant and then we big leaf. When we harvest the plant, we like taking all of the big leaves off of the stem, because if you don't take the big leaves off the stem, you end up with a really hay taste. You know how weed tastes kind of like straw or hay? That's the direct reflection of you not taking off the big leaves, and we like to snap them all the way off. And then we like to trim the edges a little bit. This stops the chlorophyll, and it gives a way better flavor on the end product. So the first day we big leafed and harvested. The second day we bucked. And what bucking is you take the buds off of the plant. So we had a lot of stuff drying. Let me see if I can find them pictures of where we had stuff drying. All right, there we go. So all the plants in the back were drying, and we've got to get the buds off of it. So the whole second day we spent taking the buds off of those plants. They had us hooked up with sniffers that were looking for molds and other types of airborne allergens. And so they hooked us up every day, and my deal was to give them data on what each day would look like. So the first day we harvested, the second day we bucked, we took all the buds off the plants, and then the third day we hand trimmed. And as you can see here, they got us hooked up to a glove. It was a glove that tracked repetitive motion. So they're looking for carpal tunnel and those kind of things. Basically, how we got the federal government to come out and do this is that in America, our workforce is our most valuable commodity we have. So I think that's why the federal government felt safe in putting their toe into the cannabis industry for the workers, since they're so valuable to us. So the report, it took a while for the report to come out, honestly. It took well over a year and a half. At first they said, last year they said, in April they said, well, we're not sure if it's gonna come out that year. Let's wait till August. Then we get to August, they say it's election year. Let's wait till November. They kicked the ball down to November, and we got to November and they said, oh, we've got a new administration. Let's kick the ball until February. February happened, oh, we've got a new head of the department for the Department of Health and Human Services. Let's kick it down till April. So April came along and I gave James Couch, who's become a good friend of mine. Actually, a few of the agents that came to my farm, we text back and forth. They send me pictures of their babies. We send holiday cards to each other. He was at home on maternity leave. I guess his wife was just going back to work, and he said, I haven't heard anything yet, but I'm on maternity leave. But you'll know for sure by the 24th of April. But the next morning I woke up and we had an overnight package where the report came, along with flyers for me to hang in my workplace. By the end of the week in April, on April 5th, it was up on the federal government website. And then in August 18th, just a few months ago, I actually have my own .gov website dedicated to the work we did with the federal government. And one of the cool bonus things is that the work also made it into the Library of Congress, which I was really excited about, where they used the word cannabis instead of marijuana, and they called me an organic farmer. And in the report, it straight says, on the 5 acres, they grew organic cannabis. So technically, I'm the only federally recognized organic cannabis farmer in the world at this time. So basically what I want to show you is don't have any fear. Go with your heart, go with love. Just get out there and keep charging, getting the movement forward. Getting together like this and meetups and bringing in attorney generals like you have. You guys are doing a great job out here. One of the things I really want to get into is about how you get these laws passed. We've ran into a lot of obstacles over the years, trying many different ways to do it. It's been a political hot button issue, which has really calmed down in the last two or 3 years. But basically, it is the only way you're really going to get legislation passed. Get out there, vote, like he said, get it on the ballot, talk to your friends, encourage to get it on the ballot. Then once it gets on the ballot, it's a whole new ballgame, because then it goes into the state legislature. This is where the money comes in. You guys need to find yourself a benefactor who has been affected by cannabis in a positive way. There's money in politics. There's no doubt about it. It's the way this country runs. And if you want the laws to be changed in your favor, you better have that checkbook out, and you better be the first one to the desk, because Merrick and GW Pharmaceuticals, they're walking up and down the hallways of Washington, California with a $50 million checkbook, just handing out checks. And as long as we have privately funded elections, we're going to run into these problems out there. So I just want to give you guys the real truth about it is, it's, at the end, to get the laws swayed, once the law's passed is one deal, but then getting all the details are in the wording. To get the proper wording there, that all costs money. So you're going to need to really find yourself a benefactor. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that have been affected by cannabis in a positive way with big checkbooks. They may be afraid to come out, but if you can just get a checkbook, start and put it into some nonprofit for cannabis and get it out there to these state representatives, especially the ones who, the chairs of these different committees. Those are the key ones to make sure you get money to them, because that's how it really works. I got taught by the best. You know, the union had set up the deal with the whole NIASH thing. So, I mean, I literally got to spend 6 months with the top union guy in the nation, and he had every phone call on speakerphone. And then he taught me how to do it. We went to the Oregon State Legislature, went to this lady's office, this head of this subcommittee, asked to give her here's how you do it. You go, we'd love to make a donation. How much do you need? She said, oh, I could use 5,000. Oh, here's 10,000. And by the way, this is the language we want put into this bill. Boom, done. It's over. So that's how I mean, that's literally how you do it. You go in there with the checkbook, you pay them, you do that same method, pay them double what they're asking for, and then ask them to put the language in the final bills that come out, because that's where that's where everything is make and break. So I love what everybody was saying there. I mean, get out there and vote, do everything, but remember, in this country at this time, it's all run by money. So find yourself a big benefactor who's been affected by cannabis in a positive way. Work with those people, hand out those checks, and write the laws the way you want to write them. Some of the laws you really want to write in there is you definitely want to have home grow. Cannabis is a very healing plant. The reason why every grower says they grow the best weed is because cannabis is such a healing plant. It responds to who's taking care of the plants. So like in our collective garden, we hang articles of clothing or something that has to do with our patient in our garden, because we know that their residents will pick up and it will be healing for them also. So cannabis is a really healing plant. I think it's really, really great for any kind of recovery or anything, to nurture something along that's going to be really good for you. So push for the home grow, push for the gifting. You know, even if it's a half ounce or an ounce or whatever, really push to be able to gift to other patients. A lot of the things we're seeing in Washington is it's all been set up for, you know, the big corporations to come in and take over. So watch where you spend your money with the small guys. We built a pretty good brand over the years. And my thing is I really want to help small farmers stay on the farms and farm. So what I've done is I work with a large distribution company in Oregon, and we're helping these small farmers keep their farms and stay on their farms and get their product to market. A lot of people are playing the Walmart game out there. You know, they plan to lose $50 million right off the bat and push everybody else out of business. Well, we've seen how well that works across the country, and it doesn't work very well for everybody. It works pretty well for a small group of people. So watch where you spend your money, support your small farmer, support your small farmers when you're out buying cannabis, when you guys get to that point. And let me think of anything else I can say about this wonderful plant. It's going to be a long road. There's going to be a lot of twists and turns. My advice to everybody is you got to be like Gumby, you know, because the laws are going to change on a daily basis. When you're in this, don't get too attached to any one regulation or how it's going to look, because it could change next week. You got to be really flexible. You got to really be focused, and don't give up, and just put your head down. You know, you're going to run into haters. You're going to run into the gamut of it all, but put your blinders on, be like a duck, let all that shit roll off, and just keep going. You know your goal, you know what you're here to do. You're here to normalize this plant and make sure everybody has access to it, because it's such a healing plant. Whether you're working a 9-to-5 job that's really stressful, and what jobs aren't stressful these days, and how nice it to come home to take a toke to a person with Crohn's disease, or a child with epileptic seizures. We're fighting for all of us. So South Carolina, you guys are doing a great job. I look forward to following you guys and seeing how well you do. And I'm available. You know, if anybody wants to pick up the phone and talk, my number's on my card. I'm open to help anybody out. Give them at least a path to go down to or point them in the right direction. So I just want to thank everybody for coming out today. I want to thank Cannabis Forward. I want to thank Emily over there, who's a total trooper, for bringing this all together. I want to thank Sean Stafford for bringing me out here, and yeah, thanks for sticking up for cannabis. Have a great day.